Test 1 2.
Check.
1 2. Turning.
Checking.
Checkity check. Check.
Checking. Okay.
Episode. Okay.
98.
Shut up.
What? Shut up.
I said shut up.
You shut up. Everybody's gonna wonder why we have to say.
Hey, speaking of working together. No. All right. Episode 098. You and I work with other people every day. You know what? We didn't even check to make sure we're actually test 1 2. Can you do yours?
Test 1 2. 1 2 3 4 5.
Yeah.
6,
Okay. Good.
1 2 3.
Episode 098. You and I work with other people every day. There's very little that we can actually do in our lives that doesn't require us to interact and ultimately to collaborate with other people. Well, in today's episode, I talk with two amazing people who are focused on helping each of us to work and think with people who think differently than us.
Welcome to the World Changer Show with Matt McWilliams. I'm your host, Mark Sieverkrop, a world changer just like you and Matt. On each show, we're going to bring you an inspiring person or message to help you unleash the world changer inside of you and live with passion, lead with purpose, and leave a legacy. Thanks for joining us today. Now let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the World Changer Show. This is episode 98, and you can find the links to everything we talk about today, including the unedited video cast of this interview, on the show notes page at mattmcwilliams.com/098. And before we get into the interview, as you're listening to this interview, if you like what you hear and you want to see the book yourself, get out your phone and text WCS giveaway to 33444. Again, that's WCS giveaway, all one word, to 33444 to be entered to win a free copy of the book that Matt and our guests talk about today. Are you ready to get started, Matt?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, today we have two guests, and our first guest is the CEO Emeritus of Professional Thinking Partners, an organization that teaches collaborative thinking to CEOs and senior executives around the world. A former senior affiliate of the Organizational Learning Center at MIT, she has served as a faculty member at the Union Institute and co-authored the international bestseller Random Acts of Kindness. Our second guest is CEO of Professional Thinking Partners and a founder of the Worldwide Women's Web, a network formed in 2001 to retain women in corporate leadership roles. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy this interview with Dawna Markova and Angie McArthur.
Well, Dawna, Angie, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Hey, it's great to have you here. Well, first off, Dawna, Angie is actually your daughter-in-law.
She's my daughter in love.
I love that. So I'm curious. Like, this is just a curiosity question, to kind of kick us off here. How are you so fortunate to get a daughter-in-law that you could actually work with professionally, or how did you convince someone that you could work with professionally to become a part of your family? Which way was it?
It's a good question. Well, it was actually, my son, after announcing to me that he was never going to get married, and I better get used to that idea. He's my only son. 2 weeks after that, he called me up to tell me he met the woman of his dreams.
Isn't that how it works?
Yes, it is, actually. And I met Angie, and I just totally loved her immediately. And Angie at the time was selling real estate. And it was strange to me that this woman who was obviously so full of feeling and metaphor and made such amazing connection with people would be selling real estate. I don't know why that surprised me, but it did. And as we got to know each other, I realized that I had no idea how to relate to a daughter-in-law, because I had always heard of that as an adversarial relationship. And I did not want an adversarial relationship with my one and only daughter-in-law. So I changed it to daughter-in-love. And everything in this book, although it's not geared specifically to personal relationships, actually came from the research that we did with each other, as well as working with senior leaders around the world, in how do you create a collaborative relationship where we become advocates for each other rather than adversaries.
So how does that, since you guys are in business together essentially with this,
Yes.
Is that intense? I'm just curious, like, what does that do for the relationship, first of all, but how does the relationship affect the business and vice versa?
Well, I think it makes the work of collaboration very real. And, I think it makes it even all the more important because we have to work through every issue and we have to do it with an impeccable amount of respect and trust for each other. And I think for me personally, what that's able to do, what that experience has been able to do is translate that into all domains of life. And so I think that in the beginning, when I first started working with professional thinking partners, it was a very scary element because when you come up against differences or, a certain breakdowns, because we all do, we're human. That's what happens, is to learn both processes and ways of understanding each other and also doing it in a way in which you protect the essence of your family, of your love for each other is to me the greatest gift I've been given out of all of this work is the capability to do that and the capacity to do that. And so we live and breathe every single one of the tools that we talk about in here. And it is why our relationship has been able to be so healthy and continues to grow. Despite everything that we know about collaboration, we still learn a lot every day about collaboration.
Yeah. Well, you guys are living it. I'm curious, do you ever find it hard, Angie, to go home at the end of a rough day and say, man, my co-author is just, hey, wait, that's my mom you're talking about.
I think there's moments where it's less about Dawna, but more about myself. It's do I trust myself to get through this? Because Dawna has had so much experience getting through so many different kinds of relationships. And so for me, and especially with David, because he is, the bridge between us in some ways, but actually I don't discuss a lot of the moments I have with Dawna, with Dave, until I have it more sorted out in my head. I don't know if that makes sense because,
Yeah, sure.
Dawna and I are in conversation all the time. So we work at things out together. And I think in most mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationships, what happens is maybe they don't work it out together. So then they use the husband or the third party to kind of help bridge or understand that. But, I think that's part of what makes this very clean is it's really a relationship between Dawna and I.
I think one of the things that makes it sound like it would even be more stressful is that all of us are in the same company. So my husband, Angie's husband, who is also my son, as well as my former publisher, we started this company together. We actually lived on the same piece of land in Utah for a long time, and then I ended up moving away to California and now to Hawaii. But so we are very much in each other's world constantly. And the reason the subtitle of the book increases the challenge, because the book is called Collaborative Intelligence, Thinking with People Who Think Differently, is that the four of us think extremely differently. So my husband is very physical. He loves to tell stories, but he's primarily is a musician, and music is the language he thinks in. Angie's husband, David, my son, is an athlete and is meticulous and is very procedural, is very detailed in how he thinks and very analytic in how he thinks. I generate ideas all the time. Angie bridges back and forth and thinks analytically as well as thinking innovatively. So we all are very different. And if we didn't understand about what I call intellectual diversity and understand it very, very well and have researched it very, very well, there is no way. And we would have all been divorced. We never would have had a company. We've been doing this for 15 years. So we've had a lot of practice.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. That kind of leads into something that I think would be really key to talk about because, I have a business partner who thinks very differently than I do. She's also the mother of our children and my wife. And that, that does create its own unique challenges. And, I thought for the longest time, because I came from a company where that we had 3 business partners, and 2 of us, we'd been friends when we went into business together. We'd already been friends for 10, 12 years. We've been friends for about over 20 years now. And so we had been friends for a while. We knew everything about each other. We knew how each other, we were roommates in college. We knew exactly how to get on each other's nerves. We knew when to agree and when to disagree. And we were always in sync. Like, he and I were step and step. But the third business partner was 20 something years older than us. We were both in our mid 20s at the time. And we were growing this, multi-million-dollar company literally from above the garage. And we kind of all woke up one day. We're like, wait a minute, we're making a lot of money. We have 52 people that work for us, and we don't know what we're doing. My friend and I, like really good friend, we were always the ones who were just like, yeah, let's do this, let's do that, like shiny object syndrome. And we just like, we took like 7 seconds to process something that might be a $500,000 decision, and we would just do it. And the other one was always like, okay, guys, can we analyze this a little bit? Can we make sure that we actually have money to do that? Can we make sure that we're going to still meet payroll if this idea doesn't go so well? And we're like, why do you hate us so much? Why do you always keep us from doing what we want to do?
Yeah.
The funny thing was, when we looked back, when we thought about it, we said, here's the thing. There was about a 1% chance that he kept us from growing bigger than we could have. Maybe he did hold us back. But there's about a 99% chance that he kept us from going bankrupt in the first 2 years. Yeah. And we needed that. And as frustrating as it was, we needed him to rein us in, because we were just all over the place. We were like playing mental ping pong all the time. Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm curious, like, I know that there are advantages to working with people who don't think the same, but what are some of the reasons why we shouldn't just work with people who think like us, even though it's easier?
You want to take it first?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think because it creates mediocrity, in our opinion, because when you have people who think the same, it reinforces a lot of what you already may come up with, or ideas. And it's fun. You generate, like, you're a perfect example. Between the 2 of you, it sounded like you generated a lot of ideas. That's very rich. But as you pointed to, without the diversity of thinking, it is harder to manage. But once you learn to recognize it, and recognize it more quickly, that's how diversity shows up, and you can manage the thinking, then the result is so much greater. And without that, then we have what we call blind spots. And these blind spots can be huge. They can be $500,000 mistakes. They can be the effect of a new product on people that we maybe didn't check out. I mean, there's all different ways. And so unless we're fully aware of our blind spots, then we can run into real trouble down the road. So the richness that you get from a very diverse team is not only because of the different perspectives, but also because it helps us push that pause button for maybe a little bit longer and really understand different motivations, different reasons for things, and each person is going to bring that into the room. And I'll ask for Dawna to add to that.
Well, would you rather go to a baseball game that had 2 pitchers as the only players on the team, or had people that could play all positions? Would you rather go to listen to music that had 2 guitarists, or would you rather listen to music that had either a full orchestra or had guitarists and drums, etc.?
Depends on who those guitarists are.
Well, that's a good point.
I can think of a few that I would rather go see than a good orchestra, but I get the point.
We are thinking, when you just pay attention to thinking itself, it goes as it develops. It goes through 4 stages. It's meant to go through 4 stages. I call them C-A-R-E. C is the create, the innovative, the idea, which you and your partner obviously were very good at. Next, as the idea is metabolized in your brain, it goes to A, which is to advance by analyzing. And that's your third partner. Mm-hmm. Next, it goes to refining. And refining is comparing it with the past and also creating a very procedural, detailed plan. And next, it goes to E, which is to evaluating it. And evaluating it includes the people who's going to execute it, what effect is it going to have on people. Then it goes back to C again. So it's like a cycle.
Yeah.
If you really want something to be successful, it needs to have all 4 elements. And very often, I've worked with a lot of senior leadership teams of big companies. Very often, the senior leadership teams or any leadership team reflects the CEO or the main leader and his or her thinking, but leaves out the rest. So the senior leadership team of Frito-Lay, as an example, had a CEO who was very good at the create, and he was very good at the R, the refining the idea, and the execute. He didn't analyze anything. And so he picked a whole leadership team that was like that. And so Frito-Lay would come up with these great ideas. They'd figure out how has it been done in the past and who else is doing it, and then they'd execute it. But because there was no analysis, they didn't take into consideration very much, that they rushed through that and didn't take into consideration the bottom line, analyze which other companies had tried that product and failed. And they kept making the same mistake and the same kind of mistake over and over again. So when he hired a new COO, he hired one who was highly analytic and very good at advancing. And although it became annoying to everybody else, like, why do you keep saying but every time we say yes? Ultimately, they stopped making the kinds of mistakes they were making.
That's a good point. I think of like in football, if you have an offense, like a really skilled offensive mind for a head coach,
yes,
his first hire is a defensive coordinator, not an offensive coordinator. Because if need be, he can serve as the offensive coordinator.
Exactly.
And in that kind of organization, depending upon what his payroll should be for hiring his coaches, he would probably spend the most money on a defensive coordinator. And maybe he can hire, a newbie, a younger offensive coordinator that he can train as an offensive coordinator. And I think that's when you see that, when you look at the successful coaches, they hire their weak spots and they build a team of, 10, 15 coaches. Yes. And I know for me in our business, like that's operations.
Yes.
That is, it's the E. It's the E and to some extent the R. Like I've got the C down.
Right.
Well, it would be the A and the E is what I meant to say. Sorry, the A and the E. I've got the C and the R down. I'm good at those. The A and the E, I'm like, we're not even close. And I realize that, and I say, okay, so what does that mean? I need an operations person.
Yeah.
And I need somebody that can come in and.
What's so great about your example? I couldn't do football. I had to save my life. Baseball a little bit. But what's so great about your example is that as a people, as a species, human beings do know how to collaborate in an excellent level in sports and in entertainment.
Interesting.
But we do not know, and we do very well with people that think differently in sports and entertaining. But we don't cross the bridge and apply that to business. And so we are far more successful in our sports and in our entertainment than we are in our business.
So how do we diversify? Like, how do we, it's not like you can go out, I guess, and put an ad out that says, I would like somebody who thinks the complete opposite of me. Right. How do you think? I don't know. I am who I am. Like, how do we diversify our teams and the people around us? Like, I think of, I'm in a mastermind group. And one of the guys in the mastermind in particular is also, he's really good at asking those questions. Okay, so what are you going to do next? Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know yet. No, so what are you going to do next? Well, I'm going to do this, and then what are you going to do? And he's trying to get to like, okay, did you think this through? Like when I said, I was like, I need to write a book, and he's like, well, what are your goals for this year? And I listed my goals, and he's like, how does writing a book fit anywhere in those goals? I'm like, it doesn't, but I want to write a book, like I just want to write one. Yeah. And he's really good at those. Whereas I'm the one, like I said, that's, coming up with an idea a minute. And then when he needs an idea person, the first person he calls is me. Yes. And that kind of just happened organically. But how do we be more intentional about diversifying the people around us and diversifying our teams at work?
Well, both Angie and I will take this. I'll start first, but then she'll give you some more of the specific details because we think differently. It would be as if I said to you, I don't get football. I've never watched a game on television except with my son when he watches the Dallas Cowboys, and then I just do it because he gets so excited. I like being in that energy. But you started talking about these offensive, defensive, frontliners, backliners. I wouldn't know what I was talking about. You'd have to start teaching me to understand the strategy with which football is being played and the different strategies. And that's what our book is about. It is like a handbook of 4 essential strategies to understand the kinds of differences you need to have to think really well. On Amazon right now, there's 120 plus some books about how do you think with people, how do you cope with difficult people? That's amazing. I think that's more than on any, the titles are all the same. So what is really true is who we label as being difficult are really people who think differently than we do.
Yeah, we would have labeled our third business partner difficult.
Exactly.
Right.
But
So
like
now
I said, it turned out he probably saved us from bankruptcy.
Exactly. So now let Angie give you some more specifics than I gave you.
Well, I think so. To answer your question in twofold, the first is that first recognizing the diversity that you do have, whether it's an existing team or a family system even. And, you know, we have 4 different ways, at least in this book, that we look at diversity of thinking. The first is mind patterns, which is really how you're hardwired. It's the specific ways in which you think, learn, and communicate. And we don't recognize this diversity. So, for example, for some, it may be very natural for them to send long, detailed emails. And for another person, they respond with 1 or 2 lines. And the first person will be very offended by the second person. Mm-hmm. But they're just differences in communication styles. So for others, like Andy, Dawna's husband, the best way that I can actually get through to him when we're thinking together is by going on a walk and talk. While walking, we actually generate great conversation. We don't notice these things. Instead, we pay attention to what is the content of what we're thinking about, not how we are thinking together. So a lot of organizations and a lot of teams get really stuck because we enter into the same kind of meeting rooms with the big round table, sit in your chair, maybe write a couple of individual notes. These are not what this whole strategy is about, is recognizing what enables you to think really well. How do you use visual, kinesthetic, and auditory information in a way in which your attention is alive or open, which is where you have aha and insight? That's the first strategy. The second strategy is all around the specific ways in which light your brain up. This is the thinking talents work. So it's identify what are your innate talents, what is core to your thinking. And often they're so innate to people that they don't even recognize it as a talent. So for example, one of Dawna's is storytelling. Until she recognized it as a specific talent, then she may have, just thought, who knows how she would have thought of herself. But we have 36 different thinking talents that we have people claim 5 to 8 that are really natural to them. And this is, again, a way of recognizing diversity, because whether it's your wife or your business partner, you're going to start to see that diversity in thinking. We have teams create what we call thinking talent maps. So again, we make it a visual process. The third strategy that helps us recognize diversity is inquiry, the natural ways in which you ask questions. Where are you coming from when you're trying to enter or solve a challenge? You said that you come up with ideas really quickly. So is your natural approach to facing a challenge coming up with a new idea or a new concept or just a new strategy? That would be a very different way of approaching a challenge than someone like your business partner who probably needs more data, wants to understand why. Without recognizing these different ways, then we don't know what kind of diversity we're dealing with. And the fourth is a mindset, which is really, a growth mindset or a limited mindset. And we have, and each of us like to think that we have a growth mindset, but we have them in different domains of our life. And so in some domains of your life, you may have a growth mindset, relationships, sports, at work, but in other domains, you may have a very limited mindset. Or with certain people, you have a growth mindset because you've had a great connection with them. Maybe they think just like you do, and so you have a growth mindset around them. But when you're around another person, you feel more limited. these are, again, it's just a different way for diversity to show up. So that's, what we offer in the book are all these tools and ways of understanding each other. So that's the first concept, is what is the diversity that you already have? What does your team look like? We call it your intellectual capital. We understand assets on many, many levels, but none of us look at the thinking assets that we have within companies. And this is critical.
One of the things that we do that you could do with anybody is to create what we call a collaboration handbook. And each person on a team answers 5 or 6 or 8 questions, such as what's the best way for you to communicate with me if you're really pissed at me? What's the best way for you and I, if we want to generate ideas, what would be best for you? Do you prefer email or voicemail or text, et cetera, et cetera? Then you put that together and you have an operations handbook for your entire team. Angie and I have been doing it since we're on a book tour with interviewers. Why do you choose a form of interviewing? Yesterday, we worked with a woman who chose a form where we had to physically be present in the same studio. She had read the book and made notes all over her desk and little cards and wanted us to respond. The whole thing was set up like that. That's obviously very different than you're doing now.
A little bit.
And we did one, this particular form that you're choosing, but there was no video. Why is the video important to you? All of those are clues as to how your mind works. And each of the interviewers we're having, the way, the conditions in which they're staging an interview tell us a huge amount about how their mind processes information.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually talked with Angie about that just before we got on, and I was telling her how I used to do an audio only, probably the first 80 episodes, 75 or 80 episodes. I can't remember when, and it was amazing how often, like, we weren't picking up on nonverbal communication.
Yes.
And like I told her, if you see me over, those of you just listening, you won't be able to see this. If you see me off to the side of my microphone, it means I'm intently listening to you. As my mouth moves slowly towards the microphone, I'm going to talk soon. Like, you can tell there's something I want to interject. And it's the same as if, in person, if somebody holds up a finger to signify, hey, I hate to interrupt, but there's really something important. Or, most people, when they talk, they move their body one way or the other. Some people lean back when they're going to talk. They lean in to listen. They lean back to talk. Some people lean in to talk. I mean, just everybody's different, but you have that nonverbal communication. And I have the quality of the interviews that I've had in the past, 20 episodes or so since we started doing this, have been immensely better. We don't have the problem of interrupting. We don't have we don't have the problem of, like, my mind doesn't wander. As I mentioned, I have the idea minute. And if somebody's talking and I don't have that visual,
right,
I can completely just lose. I'll admit, like, I used to do interviews and I could completely forget what somebody was saying, and they would finish and I'd be like, I don't have a question for you. I got nothing. Or I would just ask the next question on my list. And I can imagine my audience is going, wow, he just opened the door for you to really ask a follow-up question, and you let that go. Yeah. so that's why we do it. But you mentioned Angie, you mentioned the walk and talk. And that's actually something that when I was at a previous business, people knew that if you wanted to get something done in a quick amount of time with Matt, you went on a walk.
Yeah.
And go walk 2 miles. First of all, you get out, get some fresh air, get some exercise, or go out and throw the football. And I mean, we literally, my favorite story is we went out for a quick meeting. We had a problem in the company that we couldn't figure out how to solve. And I asked guy, I was like, let's go for a walk. We went out. 35 minutes later, we formed an entire department.
Right.
And he went from being my assistant to heading up the department, and we hired 4 people for him, like, in a week.
Yes.
Boom. And that it solved a huge problem in our company.
Yes.
And that would not have happened. I could have sat in a room. You could put me in a room for 10 hours and I probably would have killed somebody, and we wouldn't have accomplished anything.
Right. And this is, luckily you have not only leadership, but that about yourself. So, and I don't think people recognize how limited their thinking is when we either sit in a cubicle or we sit in a meeting room. And so, because often those are the only ways in which it's considered the right way to meet. We have to start playing with and being braver about, I mean, any conference, any talk that I'm hosting, I ask people to stand up and walk around in the back of the room while we're presenting, because for some people it lights up their brain a little bit more. And so we have to start breaking these rules. And the other thing we have to do is stop the stories in our head as someone does think differently than we do. So if someone looks away, this just happened to me in a filming in New York, as the cameraman kept saying, "Why do you keep looking away when you start talking?" And I said, "Because I'm drawing on my experience. It's very natural for me to look away. And so I'm watching the movie of what happened in my head, and that allows me to talk, in a more fluid way." And so he's like, "Oh, okay." So then he stood in front of the camera, and we were able to make it work because then I could look at him. But without knowing these things about ourselves, we attach stories to it. Like, oh, he keeps looking away as he's talking to me. That must mean he's disinterested. Or she's pacing while she is trying to mull over that decision. That must mean that they're not, going to go the way that I want it to do. We make up stories all the time about people that are simply inaccurate, that we contribute to behaviors, when really it's just our minds are all different in how we think.
And we assume that what works for us should work for other people if they're smart like we are. So I won't use politics as an example because it's too easy a target, but I'll use Frito-Lay because it's a company that most people know about. The CEO of Frito-Lay is like the guy that you were describing. He needed to walk, he needed to move, he had great ideas with other people when he threw the football around. He hired a phenomenal CFO. The CFO sat still the way I'm sitting in this moment. He stared straight directly at you. He never even moved a finger. Well, you shiver. And that's what most of us do when we meet somebody who thinks differently. We consider that they have a deficit, that they're difficult, that they're dumb, because they think, what Al, the CEO of Frito-Lay, said, the guy's ice cold. He's got no energy. Well, you put this guy in a conversation with a spreadsheet and suddenly he comes fully alive. And Al was really resistant to hiring him because he wasn't smart like Al was, and Al would punch him and the guy would cringe and not say another word. And Al was just punching him on the shoulder because that's the way that Al said hi. And this guy had, sat still. He didn't like to be touched. And Al thought, well, he must be uptight. His toilet training was no good. So we do this to one another constantly without using these as clues that when Al wanted to talk to his CFO, he had to sit down if he wanted to hear what he was saying and give him, so when we assume in sports, we know this, in entertainment, we know this. If we go to a foreign country, if you go to Japan and somebody has a different mannerism, you just assume that's because they're Japanese and it's your responsibility to learn their mannerism. Well, if you're going to be an entrepreneur or you're going to be a successful leader, then you better learn the mannerisms, the cues from the people that you're working with. You just rubbed your nose and looked away, so I guess it's time for me to shut up now.
No, that's a really good point. You mentioned the spreadsheets. I jokingly tell people the quickest way to get your email deleted without me reading it is for there to be a spreadsheet attached, because I just don't do spreadsheets. Like it's exhausting. We had to do we're doing our tax projections for our CPA, and it means I have a spreadsheet and we're going through, and I mean just the whole act of like opening Excel just makes me nauseous. But another good one is when I'm meeting with my wife. Actually, when I'm in any meeting, I doodle. Like if you go back and look at my journals, my notes, my business meetings, I mean, I draw a lot of stuff. Well, that's how I work. It's not that I'm disinterested. In fact, when I'm doodling, it's when I'm most interested in what you're saying.
Yes.
If you go back and look at, stuff and you don't find doodles or just like little scratches or whatever, it actually means that I was so focused on pretending that I was paying attention that I couldn't let my mind wander that little bit to doodle. And I wasn't paying attention. And so it drives my wife nuts sometimes. She's like, why are you doodling? I'm like, that's how I think, but not everybody does that. I think less than like 20% of the population is effective at doodling. They use doodling as an escape. I use it as just something that keeps my mind mildly occupied while I'm listening. So
Well, I would challenge your number, except that you're not about analytic thinking and numbers. So you have
yeah, I made it up. I know.
What is true, what I think is true is that you could have fun with, knowing and accepting it's part of how you think, is if you go back, because I had a CEO I worked with, this was exactly what he did. If you go back over doodles that you did 3 months ago and you retrace them, your brain will tell you every word that was discussed while you were making that line. It's called an engram, and your brain uses those doodles. In fact, they hold the entire conversation. That wouldn't work for everybody, but it would work for other people whose minds process information the same way that yours do. And this is no more mystical than why a violinist uses rosin on the string of a bow. Now, to a drummer,
wow,
a bow would be a really bizarre and weird thing, because to a drummer, why do you need a bow? To some people, why do you need to doodle? It means you're not paying attention. As you said, it's quite the opposite. For you, it means you're paying very careful attention.
Okay, so I want to just wrap up now because I want to go find a journal that I have some doodles. This is blowing me away. Okay, wow, I've got to do that later. So after I ask this question, I'm going to doodle. No, I'm just kidding. After I ask this question, I need to write myself a note to do that in a minute.
Yes, yes.
This is mind blowing. Okay, so as we come close to wrapping up here, Dawna and Angie, there's something a question that I've been meaning to ask this whole time, and I haven't quite done it yet. There's something you say in the intro, and I'm going to read a little snippet here. You say, we habitually misread people. That's what we've been talking about, and therefore miscommunicate with them. You say, what keeps us from communicating effectively is that most of us don't know how to think with people who think differently than we do. So why isn't this something that I could ask this about a million things? Like, why don't they teach that in school? Because this seems to be like a pretty important interpersonal skill, because I am going to make up a statistic that I know is true. And that is that 100% of the people on the face of the earth think differently than I do at something. Okay. So that being said, if 100% of the people that I'm going to encounter think differently than I do at something, if not multiple somethings, sometimes everything, it seems, why are we not taught how to work with others that think differently than us?
It's a really good question, and it's what has driven Dawna and I to, I mean, she's been exploring this for 50 years, and I've been exploring it for the last 20 with her. It's why the work of collaboration is so necessary, because we're not taught how to do this. We're not given the tools. We're not taught how to stop making the quick assumptions that we do that lead us down a certain road when we are thinking with someone, especially, and it starts very young in school. We actually wrote another book specifically for families, I Am Smart, that applies all of the concepts to kids, because that's where it starts, is that, collaboration is really about understanding all the ways in which you are unique, your wife is unique, your kids are unique, your business partner is unique, and being able to do that in a facile way while life is going on and we're trying to make decisions together. And so it's actually, you're asking the same question that we live and love, and why this book is so important to us.
Let me give you, though, something for free, okay? The reason I think that we don't, because I've been working in education and with kids and parents for 5 decades, people make too much money by being able to attribute the differences we're talking about as deficits. We can medicate kids, et cetera, et cetera. We have 2 free apps available on the iTunes store. One is for parents to understand the way they process information and the way their kids process information. And it's 2 words. The first one is SMART. The second word is SPARK, S-P-A-R-K. And that's one of the 4 strategies we talk about in the book. The second app is for another of the strategies called Thinking Talents, to understand the part about, does someone think analytically, do they tell story, do they come up with ideas? That is also free, and it's in the App Store, and it's under Thinking Talents. That's what it's called. The company that is distributing it is Levo League, L-E-V-O. So that's our gifts to you. And it's your job to spread it out to the world. And I will promise to you that I'll learn a little bit more about football. So the next time you and I talk, I'll know a little more about what you're talking about.
That's awesome. We'll make sure to link to those. And you just made me think, Dawna, of a past guest we had, Dr. Dale Archer, who he's written 2 books. It sounds like you guys may have heard of him. Wrote The ADHD Advantage is his new one. And Better Than Normal is the other one. And I haven't read that yet. I've actually got 4 copies sitting over here. I walked into a bookstore, never even heard of the book. And I had just interviewed him though, like a week before. It was like total, whoa, that blew me away. And his book is like facing me. I'm like, I'm going to just get all the copies that they have here. And so I'm looking forward to reading that. But the ADHD Advantage taught me that this thing that I was diagnosed with when I was like 7 years old, that my mom, would not let them medicate me. Like I've always kind of had that I'm mildly distracted thing. And I've always seen it as a disadvantage until I read that book and went, okay, well, would I trade? Do I want to be a little bit more calm and quote unquote comatose and lose the things that I do have? Nope. I kind of like those things. Like I am not taking the chance that I'm going to lose those things. So if you could wave a magic wand or give me a magic pill, I wouldn't take it. I wouldn't do it. I would be like, if I have to be this way in this area to be this way in this area, I'm cool with that. So
my way of translating that's in our book, Collaborative Intelligence, Thinking with People Who Think Differently, is that it isn't a deficit. It's an asset. It means that you are energized by generating new ideas and talking, and that we need to be alive and energized with each other. And you're calmed down when you're still and when you're doodling and making images. We just don't know how to operate our own minds. And so we think we have to medicate them, or we think it's a deficit rather than recognizing it's an asset. And please thank your mother every day for not medicating it.
I recently did. I had the opportunity to. I didn't know that, actually. And I was talking to her about it one day, and she's like, yeah, actually, they diagnosed you when you were 7. Because I just always kind of thought maybe I was. I was like, really? She's like, yeah, I screamed at him. I'm like, I'm not, like, I'll take him out of school. I don't know what I'm going to do, because my mom was a single mom working 3 jobs just to keep us on the right side of the tracks. And she said, I don't know what I would have done if I had to take you out of the public school, but I would have done it. And I was like, wow, Mom.
The numbers guy that you told us about in the beginning of this conversation that helped you not go bankrupt. If he had been a psychologist, he would have diagnosed you as having a deficit as well. And he would have also thought you were medicated.
He used to say that all the time. He's like, golly, you guys are so ADD about both of us, because we'd have the 3-person meeting. And then my friend Hunter and I, again, he's the CEO and I was the CEO. We're just like going back and forth. Like we could do this and this. And Bob, the other partner, who's obviously the CFO, because let's be honest, CFOs are all weird people. It's just like CPAs. They're not weird. They're just weird to me, because
they should be medicated, right?
They're different than you. They're different.
Yeah. If I were medicated, I would be a CFO or a CPA. But like he and I, Hunter and I, would be going at it like, yeah, we could do this, this, and this. And Bob's like, hey guys, I don't know if you guys remembered, but I'm also here in this meeting. Feel free to involve me. Haven't really been able to say anything for the past 20 minutes. But might I remind you guys that we don't have the money in the bank to do that. Why you got to be such a Debbie Downer, Bob? So that was us. But listen, this book, it's huge. I mean, it's got 300 and something pages.
Yeah,
it's ginormous. I mean, but the thing about it is, like, it's got stories. So people like me like stories because we remember stories. There's a story about your father, Dawna, that's a remarkable story. We didn't really have time to talk about it today, but I love it. And I remember the story. That's the thing. Like I remember the story. Not so much on the bullet points and things like that, because that's not how my mind works, but it's got tons of information, tons of strategies. So my question is, if for some reason every copy of this book and all your digital copies and all that like vanished tomorrow, and you had to boil down, you had like 2 minutes for whatever reason, this is like TED Talk on steroids. You got 2 minutes to describe this book, the most important things for this audience to know, what would you say?
I'm just laughing. If I asked you to take a football playbook And I know there is such a thing because my son has told me. And I gave you a football playbook for the Dallas Cowboys, the only football team I know the name of. And it probably would be this thick. And I said, okay, reduce it into 2 sentences. What would you say? And the reason I ask you is because I understand intellectual diversity, and I know you are much better at condensing things down to 2 sentences than I am. So what would you say about the football playbook?
It depends. It depends. If it's pass heavy, I would say we're going to pass a lot. We're going to spread the field. We're going to do this, this, and this. Great, got it. And that's how my mind works. So,
yeah. Okay. So
so maybe this is a question for Angie.
Well,
is that true? Is that true?
I think again, as Dawna said, you're probably brilliant at coming up with the 2-sentence tagline of what the book is about. I think there's something in it for everyone, and as you said, you glean from the stories. Yes. A lot of people look at it, and the charts are super helpful. We tried to make the book as multidimensional as we could. Use a lot of visual.
I noticed that. Yeah.
And we actually have some physical practices in there that have been hugely impactful for people. I've been meeting the last couple of nights with over 100 millennials each night. And what I'm struck at, what's really hitting a chord for them, so this is my 2-sentence thing, is really understanding how you matter, how your thinking matters, what specific value you bring, and then being able to quickly identify the value that other people bring, especially with those, as Dawna termed earlier, that you see as difficult. Because the more that people learn to do that, the greater intellectual capacity they will have. And that is the best collaborative, what we call, it's a currency. Collaboration is a currency in this day and age. People are changing jobs every 3 years. You may never meet that person that you're working with in India or in Bulgaria. So in order to have a wide bandwidth of who you can actually think really well with is an incredible currency. And I think this book offers a lot of insight into how to do that.
And when it comes to you, and next time we talk, whenever that is, I promise I'll be able to do this better. If you've got the ball, know when to pass and know when to run with it. And this book will help you discover under what situations you should pass the ball and what situations you should run with it, and how to not have a bunch of people fall on top of you as you do it. That's
I love it.
I'm sorry.
No, I love it. I love it. So last question, actually, more importantly, I would say, is not only when you should pass, but maybe when other people should have the ball thrown to them.
Good. Thank you.
See, look at this. For somebody who doesn't know football, Dawna, we're using an awful lot of football analogies on this.
Because it's my job to enter your model of the world. If I want to collaborate with you, I'll enter your model of the world.
See, this is practicing what you preach.
It certainly is.
I like it. So last question for both of you. I'll ask it of both of you. What legacy do the two of you want to leave?
All who are different belong. And all who think differently belong. That's mine.
And I think just
that's powerful.
For me, it's authentic, genuine curiosity.
I love it. Well, guys, they are teaching this amazing thing called collaborative intelligence, and they're helping others to work with people differently than them. I will say this experience, this interview, this book are amazing. So go grab yourself a copy. Dawna and Angie, you're both world changers. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Happy Friday.
Matt, that was a really great interview. I love the back and forth between you and Dawna about football. That made me laugh. But what was the biggest takeaway you got from this conversation with them about collaborative intelligence?
I would say that probably the most surprising thing, Mark, is that she didn't know that much about football. I mean, that was like, this is America, right? No, I'm kidding. But, you know, one of the big things I got from it is, and this is one of those things that, like, we instinctively know. I mean, it goes back to something that Dr. Dale Archer said in the past about, you know, and I talked about this, how he wrote the book called Better Than Normal. And the gist of the thesis of the book is that, like, no matter what it is, what quote unquote disorder you have, you're better than normal. So if you have ADHD, for example, well, here's how you're better than normal because of that. And so what I got out of this was like, yeah, everybody communicates differently. Everybody thinks differently, but here are the advantages to that. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, our CPA is very analytical, and he can actually he doesn't get nauseated when he looks at a spreadsheet. The advantage to that is that 2 years ago, for example, in that year alone, he saved us more than $10,000 on our taxes. We paid him maybe $1,000 or so to do that. And I want him doing my taxes, not people like me. I'm not a tax person. Like, you do not want me doing your taxes, because I'll just kind of look at it and be like, yeah, it looks good. Just roll with it. And now he's like, but don't forget about this, and this. Did you get this? Did you get this for me? Did you do that? Like, when did you pay this? Was it on this date or this date? And that's important because, like me, I would just be like, hey, let's just pay ourselves one big check on December 31st. And he's like, no. If you pay yourselves the bare minimum on this date, but then move it to the following, you pay yourselves another check on January 1st, then that'll defer some of your taxes for 3 to 12 months. Mm-hmm. Oh, I see how this is working, Mm-hmm. And so you want somebody like that who's super detail oriented to be a CPA. And so just learning, in the book, as I've looked through it myself since the interview, learning to communicate, like learning how different people are necessary to my own success, and then learning how to communicate with them in a way that helps them to thrive, but also helps them to collaborate with me, has been powerful.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing that I got from it and that really stuck out to me was, I remember Dawna talking about how people may come off a certain way, and it's really dangerous because we all, I think in today's society, we hear about, body language experts and everything, and we just assume that if somebody's looking off in a different direction, or they're doodling as you're talking to them, we're taught that means they're not listening to us. Like Matt's not now. Matt's, for those of you that aren't watching the video, Matt started looking off into space. But, that was something that I think is really important, and it was a good reminder for me that everyone's different. And just because somebody doesn't fit the quote unquote mold of paying attention doesn't mean they're not paying attention. And so that's so important, because my daughter does that. I mean, I see her doing that all the time. She's that way, where she'll have to be coloring something or doodling or walking around as you're talking to her. And I catch myself doing that, where I'm like, you know what? Stand still and look at me. Stand there and look at me and talk to me. And she can't do it, and it's not that she doesn't care or she's not paying attention. Yep. She just thinks differently, and her mind works differently, and that's okay. And so that was a big takeaway that I got out of the interview. And I love the example she used of some of the leaders and CEOs that she's worked with, of how that happens, and how you have to not only be cognizant of that with other people, but also be cognizant of yourself and how you come across because of the things that you do and the way that you act and the way that you learn and communicate.
That's a great point. Our daughter's the same way. We'll look at her and be, Arcelia, are you even listening to what I'm saying? And then she'll repeat back the previous 3 sentences
word for word,
almost verbatim. Mm-hmm. Okay, you are, even though you're over there like hanging upside down, doing whatever. But like I was the same way, and I still am to a certain extent. Like we talked about this in the interview. I do my best thinking when I'm walking, when I'm active. The best way if you want to communicate with me, the best words to say to me are, let's go for a walk. Now, obviously, we work virtually together, Mark, so that's hard for you to do. But you can suggest, hey, call me on the cell phone,
right,
and go for a walk,
right.
And it's a different. I just communicate better when I'm out and about, when I'm moving, when I'm getting a little bit of exercise, when I'm getting fresh air, whatever it is. I communicate better than if it's just, hey, let's talk while I'm staring at my computer screen.
We should try that. We've never done it. I know you've talked to me while you were walking, but we should try that with both of us doing that. That would be interesting.
We should. Let's do that.
Okay. Anyways.
As we say this now that it's winter.
Right, I know. I do, Matt, want to mention as well, you and I have both taken the DISC personality tests, and I've found them very helpful. I can't speak for you, but I found them very helpful in helping us communicate and collaborate together, and in understanding the way that you communicate and the way that that you like to be communicated to. And you've put together something called the 3 Killer Ways to Use Disc Reports. And we're going to link to that in the show notes page at mattmcwilliams.com/098. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that and how that might be beneficial to the audience?
Well, I mean, DISC, for those who don't know, it stands for the 4 personality types in the DISC profile, D, I, S, and C. You think of the D as the lion, it's, dominant. You think of the I as kind of the influencer, the life of the party, as Dave Ramsey often says, it's a party waiting for a place to happen. The S is steady. This is just it's kind of steady, doesn't really like conflict, steady as he goes. And then the C, control, analytical would be how I would describe it. The C would be our CPA. You want CPAs that are C's. That's ironic. And I don't know what the P and the A stand for. I'm kidding. But no, that's these different personality types. And for instance, I am a DI and then basically nothing else. My wife, Tara, is actually, I think she's an I and then a D, but it's very level. Like her dip from D to C is almost like 2 points, whereas mine is a 100% drop. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things. Like you can't say, aha, I'm a D and you're an I, I'm better than you. No, it's just, you're just different. Right. It's kind of like on a foot, playing football and say, well, I'm a quarterback and you're a running back. I'm better than you. No, you're not. Like if it wasn't for the running back, the quarterback would probably get sacked more often. Right. So it's you need, when you're building a team, the key is to have some D's, to have some I's, to have some S's, and to have some C's. If all you have are D's, if all you have are I's, nothing will ever get done. If all you have are D's, all you do is argue. If all you have are C's, you'll never actually accomplish anything. Right. And if all you have are S's, it'll be the most boring workplace on the face of the earth. So you've got to have the mix. And what this resource that we put together, the 3 killer ways to use disc profiles, and also the 3 mistakes that you can make with them. It's going to help you. Like, first of all, you have to go take the disc, assessment, which you can online. And then once you do, this will help you actually use this more effectively in some really cool ways, but also avoid the mistakes that I've made, at least personally, with them.
Well, and it's funny, you talk about having the different types. And when you and I first started talking about working together, I think you thought I was a high SC. And it turns out I'm an I. And I'm not quite as detail-oriented.
I don't think I ever thought you were a high C. I thought you were like an I, and I thought you were an IC. Is that what you said?
Well, SC.
Yeah.
Which and my adaptive is SC. My adaptive, my S and C are very high. So basically, I want people to think I'm detail oriented, but I'm not. I'd rather have a party. I'd rather hang out and have fun.
Yeah. No, you're an influencer. You're a connector. Yeah. You love networking and building relationships, and you're people first. Yeah. And again, there's nothing wrong with this. Right. You would put relationship with people over performance or results. Whereas somebody who is a D with no I would put performance and results over people. Right. That's why I think, for me, I'm glad that I'm a DI, not like a DC, because then, DC would be like very driven and focused, but also very detail oriented and forgetting people altogether. Right. And I've got an exact mix of D and I think. I think it's like one lower on the I. So what that means is I'm driven by performance. I'm driven by results, but I work with people to get there. Right. I don't do it at the expense of relationships.
And I think, if you have not taken one of these tests, I would highly recommend it, because I think you'll find once you've taken it, not only will you find out how you are and how you communicate, but you'll start to notice the people around you. And this is what I learned. You start to notice the way people are, and you're like, oh wow, that's why they're that way, because they have this a little bit, or they have this a little bit. And so it's very important. It's very, very useful. And it's very, it's what you and Dawna and Angie talked about is different people communicate different ways. They like to think different ways. They like to interact different ways. And if you can learn those, then you can collaborate and you can get much more done than you would otherwise. So again, you can get a link to that on the show notes page at mattmcwilliams.com/098. And as we get to our quote today, it falls right in line, Matt, with what we were talking about. And it's from Anthony Starr, who says, collaboration is the best way to work. It's the only way to work, really. Mm-hmm. Everyone's there because they have a set of skills to offer across the board. Is there anything that you want to talk about with that quote, or anything that you want to just wrap up this interview as we get close to the end, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the episode we did about solitary leaders, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't lead by yourself. You've gotta work with people, and a collaboration is the best way to work. It is the only way to work because it's one of those instances where 1 + 1 does not equal 2. 1 + 1 = 3, and 1 + 1 + 1 does not equal 3. 1 + 1 + 1 equals 10 or 20, and it's not about brainstorming or anything like that. It's just about, like, when you're working together, when you're collaborating on a project, things move significantly faster, and you have so many different life experiences to bring into the table. And so I would just echo what Anthony said. Collaboration is not only the best way to work, it's the only way to work, at least effectively.
Yeah, and that episode that you mentioned is episode 88, Matt. The 3 reasons you can't lead alone, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. Now, as we wrap up, we want to give away a copy of Dawna and Angie's book, and it is a big book. I mean, Matt, I think you mentioned that in the interview, but I mean, this is like 350 pages of just crammed, packed full of
Bibles that are smaller than this book.
I know. But it's awesome.
But it's awesome.
But it's not fluff either. I mean, it is, there's diagrams, there's charts, there's suggestions and tips to work with all different kinds of people. So if you want a copy of Collaborative Intelligence, Thinking with People Who Think Differently, send a text to WCS Giveaway to 33444. Again, that's WCS Giveaway, all one word, to 33444 for your chance to win a free copy of Dawna Markova and Angie McArthur's book, Collaborative Intelligence. Now, as we always do, Matt, let's spend a couple minutes and thank a few people who have collaborated with us to make this show such a success by leaving ratings and reviews on iTunes.
Nice segue there, by the way.
You. That was very good.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to to some people who recently collaborated with us on the success of the program, as Mark said. To Douglas J. Foley, to George Hess, to Black Founder, to People on Paper, to 6 Feet Above. It's certainly better than the alternative. And to John Wexford, all of you guys, thank you so much for your recent ratings and reviews on iTunes. These are so helpful. Love what People on Paper said. If you're trying to live an intentional life, this is a great podcast for you. Anyone who wants to improve themselves and their lives from the inside out should take the time to listen. You guys know how much these mean to us and what that does for the show. When you do this, every time you leave a rating review, it helps us rank higher, which helps us get more eyeballs and earbuds onto the show to be able to reach more people with this message.
Mm-hmm. And, another thing it does, Matt, is obviously we read all these. So it gives us some feedback of what you like, what you don't like, the types of interviews and episodes that you really find interesting. So it helps us to make sure that we're giving you good content as well.
And it fires me up. Every time I read a review, I just get more excited to do this.
Yeah, definitely. So if you haven't left us a rating and review, you can find the link towards the bottom of the show notes page at mattmcwilliams.com/098. And once again, like we said, if you want to be entered to win a free copy of the book Collaborative Intelligence, which Matt and Dawna and Angie talked about today, you can send a text to WCS Giveaway to 33444. And now for this week's question. What is one thing you can do today to collaborate better with others? Head on over to mattmcwilliams.com/098 to answer that question. And now, Matt, let's move on to your pick of the week. What do we have this week for your top pick?
Well, speaking of collaboration, the pick of the week this week is something called Slack. And the best way I can describe Slack is it's email meets instant messenger for teams, but on steroids. And it's a completely free resource. We use it as a team. We use the free version. Mm-hmm. We don't even pay anything. I have no idea what their business model is. Seems like a terrible business model. But if you're listening, Slack, love you, and we're recommending it to numerous people. Check it out. It's slack.com. We'll link to that in the show notes as well. But it is a phenomenal resource if you've got a team of people that you are communicating with, and if email is becoming a beast for you. If you're struggling with keeping up, there's too much back and forth, or you're spending too much time. I love talking. Like Mark and I talk a lot, but at the same time, sometimes it's not feasible for us to talk in real time.
Right.
And so I look at Slack it's asynchronous like email is, but you can also have a back and forth conversation, and it's got a extensive archive and just some other cool stuff. So just check it out, try it. That's what we did. We said with my team before Mark was even came on board, I was like, I'm going to try this for 1 week, guys. Let's see how this works. And everyone loved it. Like, we're sticking with this. This is the greatest thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
So I know tons of other people. All of our clients use it.
Mm-hmm.
Ray Edwards, Lewis Howells, Jeff Goins, their team, they use it. Chandler Bold and his team over at Self Publishing School, they all use it. Pat Flynn, Michael Hyatt, all those guys use it. There's a reason, and it's because it's awesome. So go check it out. We'll link to that in the show notes.
Yep. And I think, Matt, too, I was thinking about it, and this would have been beneficial even when I was working at my last job and we were all in the same office. This would have been awesome. It would have saved so much time to be able to just shoot a quick message to somebody and they could grab it when they needed to. So, I mean, it's very, very user-friendly. It's very customizable. So, yeah, we'll link to that at mattmcwilliams.com/098. Until next week, remember, you were born to change the world. You were born to make history. You were born to collaborate with others to achieve your goals. So believe it, become it, and pass it on. Woo! Next.
I feel like I should be playing some music right now.
I know. I feel like I should step away from the camera real quick and change my shirt.